Hi everyone. Well, we're back for another episode of Getting to Know You. And we have two very different guests today. One is an artist and the other is in healthcare. But I'll get to that in just a few minutes. First, I want to say that I love doing this, being in front of a camera, sitting and talking with guests. Even though I get nervous and I stress and I worry, how will the interviews go? Will you like the show? Despite this, I still like doing it. That make me weird? That's okay. I embrace my weirdness. I also like when I'm out in town, maybe shopping, and someone tells me they saw me on TV. That is so cool. Now, I have decided that I'm going to become famous, and with that, develop a huge ego. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to work on it. I'm also a person who likes to be prepared as much as possible, so I purchased these for when I get a swelled head. Well, think I'll go into them? Cool, huh? All right, and another thing I wanted to say, I have a goal today. My goal today is not to say any more ums. We'll see how that goes. All right, enough about me. It is time to get to know our first guest. His name is Patrick Wood, and he is an artist. But he is so much more than that. He has a truly inspirational story to tell. After reading his bio and then speaking to him on the phone, I could hardly wait to meet him. The wait's over. Time to get to know Patrick Wood. Mr. Wood, thank you so much for coming in today.
Hi, Nancy. It's my pleasure.
How would you like to have a seat here?
I'd love to.
Okay, and you stay on your side, okay?
I promise.
You're sure you promise?
I promise.
I'm going to hold you to that.
It's not a problem.
Okay, then.
Okay.
Okay, so is it okay if I call you Patrick?
You can call me Patrick. I'm normally known as P. Thomas Wood as an artist, and that's what I have on my website and that. But yes, you can call me Patrick.
You can call me Miss Nancy.
Miss Nancy. Okay.
Kidding. Nancy will do.
Nancy will do just fine.
Okay, so I know from your bio that you used to be a high school art teacher. Is that correct?
Correct.
And when was that?
I taught from 2005 to 2007 in Surrey. I taught from 2004 to 2005 in northern Saskatchewan. 2003 to 2004, I was in Williams Lake, and before that, I was in Delta.
So that career ended, correct?
Yes, I had a car accident 2007, January 16th. I got broadsided in the snow on my way to work, and I had a brain injury. And they really kind of don't like to put you back into the classroom after you've had a brain injury because you're not dependable enough.
Right. So let's just talk about before the accident. What was your life like basically? Prior?
I was married. I had a son that was 11 years old, and my wife and I are both teachers. My wife teaches right now in Chilliwack. She's at Sardis Elementary. Mm-hmm. And I was basically living the life of a teacher and
right.
moving around and teaching.
Right, and you were doing art, correct?
Yes,
Your own art?
yes. I've always been an artist. I did my art degree at Emily Carr. Mm-hmm. And I did my teaching degree for art at UBC.
Right, okay. So can you show us what would be your art, say, before, because I'm assuming it had changed, right?
Yes.
Do you have some pieces to show us that are before the accident?
Yes, it's just over here. You want me to go grab it?
Well, we'll have Lori bring them over here. Just a couple of pieces.
The large one and that one that you have in your hand there is good.
All right.
No, not that one.
Oh, the little one.
Right.
And the very large one.
Right.
Okay, so let's just hold this up so. Yeah, this way. Okay.
Right.
Can you get that? All right.
This is a strategy that I employed when I was graduating from Emily Carr. It was part of my graduation piece, as a matter of fact. I believe there's 25 of them. No, there's 28 of them.
28 pieces?
Yes. And what I did, I was working in the idea of Dada, which is, it was a movement that came out just after the First World War. Artists had gone through the trauma of the First World War, and they didn't think that art should be following the same path. So the word Dada means nonsense. It means, nothing. And what I was doing to start this piece was tearing up pieces of paper and dropping them down onto a wet canvas so that they would stick, and then I used that to start my composition. So each one of these pieces that are here that are colored are all torn pieces of paper, and I used the brown which is actually a yellow ochre, but it's in the brown family, because all colors delineate into brown and then they become black. You know that when you're mixing watercolors and you're washing your brush, everything goes from brown to gray and then eventually black. So brown becomes one of the best platforms to put all colors upon because all colors become brown.
Right.
This is another painting in that series. They're all different sizes. I also painted them on tubes and squares and cardboard, and there's a whole bunch of different strategies I used in that.
Right. Let's look at this big one over here. Laurie, if you want to bring that in closer for us, please.
This is what I painted a lot when I first was starting to paint. Abstract expressionism is what this is in this family. This one's called Woven, and it probably deals with the woven because there's a start of a grid right here.
Oh, I see that.
Which is something that became my art after I had the car accident, which is kind of ironic. Something like this here, I had a horrible time painting after I had a car accident because I would start the painting and then when I would go down the next day and start to work on it, I couldn't remember where I was. And this became the problem. So I ended up with a whole bunch of different half-done canvases that I didn't know what to do with. I was encouraged by the doctors and psychiatrists and neuropsychologists and that to go back and use art as therapy. So I really had an advantage in that sense, but it was really horrible in the beginning because I couldn't remember what I was doing. So I was lucky enough that when I was going to Emily Carr, I wrote down in my sketchbook all the ideas that I had. I knew there was no way I could paint them all fast enough, so I started writing down ideas. And I was able to go backwards and use it as a reference to find something that I could do after I had the car accident. And that's where these ones come in. These ones are working off a grid of 2 by 2. So what it worked out is that I put...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're just going to have to take a quick break, so just hold that thought.
Not a problem.
We'll be right back. Stay tuned. There's so much more to come. Well, we're back from the break, and I'm here talking with Patrick, and he was just explaining some of his artwork. So you were just talking about that piece.
Yes, this piece comes from this series. It's called Optical Abstraction. I call it Obstraction. Partly I got into this. I was really fascinated by color theory when I was going to art school, but probably losing the sight in my left eye brought me more towards dealing with this. Like I was describing earlier, I had a horrible time painting abstract, which is what I used to do because I couldn't remember what I was doing the day before. In hunting through my work, or actually my notes, I found that I'd been working from an idea that was going on in the 12th and 13th century in art, where they were setting up grids so that they could make pieces larger or pieces smaller when they were scaling them up and down. So this piece is 2 by 2 inches, and I've ran it all around the edge and everything. What it has, why it was such an advantage was that I could go down and paint 2 or 3 squares a day when I first had the accident, and then it didn't matter what I painted the next day because each one of them were an individual little painting. It's also dealing with a principle called Gestalt or Gestalt. It's a German term. It means some of the pieces make up the whole. So initially, when you first look at the piece, you look at it as a whole. And then little by little, you start to break it down and see it as the tiny little paintings that it is.
Yeah, you can identify,
Exactly.
I get that. Yeah,
exactly.
That's great. Let's talk about these pieces that we have up on the table here for just a second.
This is an earlier piece before the car accident. This one is in a series I call Safety Last. I've got matches. I've put and glued them down onto a canvas base, and then I painted side for side. It's a little bit like a semaphore on a ship where they do patterns with flags. So depending on which way you're looking at it, you're getting a different pattern. I also painted the heads of the matches, and I was intrigued by the fact that oil paint is extremely flammable, and the piece would go up if you set it on fire. So it actually goes back to an earlier strategy I was doing where I used to set my pieces on fire after I painted them.
Hey, maybe we can do that later.
Yeah, we probably can. It's beautiful colors. It's actually amazing when you see it because all the colors burn in different radiants.
Right? What about this one over here?
This one here joins this series, but I did it after the car accident where I was playing around with matches. I was really intrigued with what it was a term that came out of art. Clemente Greenberg is the gentleman who had it out of New York. He said art for art's sake. And what it meant was that you need to honor the materials. So I was intrigued by the fact that I paint onto a canvas, and a canvas is a material, and there's so many things that go along with canvas, like pins, you know, when you're doing sewing and things like that. So I thought it was something that I could marry to it. The piece here is also working out of a grid idea of 2 by 2 inches, but what I've done is I followed the grid with the pins first and then went in and painted it afterwards, so that it's got this really loose and rough effect. I've done a few of them in this series. What I really find intriguing to me are the backs of them.
Oh, right.
Because they become these beautiful patterns, and depending on how I follow the patterns, it becomes a painting all on its own. It's almost like I'd like to display them so that they could actually turn, so that you could see the work that's there. Plus, each one of these pins here are individually bent and maneuvered so that I can fit it and bring it back up into the head of it again. So there's an incredible amount of labor that goes on here.
Right. I'm sort of intrigued with your ideas. Like, do you wake up in the middle of the night with, an idea in your head, or?
Ideas usually rebound off of other ideas. We've talked about this fact where art really doesn't answer any questions. It just asks more. And that's kind of what happens, is that as you're wandering down this path of art, making art, there's all these little doorways on either side that open and close depending on what you're seeing from what you're making. Right. And that's kind of where that comes from, is the fact that every night I go into my sketchbook and I write down an idea that I have. Last night's idea was cleansing your palate.
Okay.
And I was thinking of pallets that we ship around on ships. So now, they really don't have much life to them except for the fact that we put things onto them and we move them around, with forklifts. And yet it's actually quite a beautiful structure. It's built for strength. It's made out of wood. It could be dressed up and painted and varnished and made look very beautiful, but it's not something that's out in the forefront. Like, you're not going to put it into a shop and say, we're selling pallets this week,
Actually, my brother-in-law drops them off at my place every once in a while, and I take them apart and I burn them in the winter because I have a fireplace.
Exactly. I used to take them apart when I was first an artist, a starving artist, and I used to make canvases out of them.
Right. So if you don't mind, I'd like to just get away from the artwork for just a little bit and talk more about the accident, like afterwards. Was it a long recovery?
Yeah. I wasn't able to paint for the first 3.5 years.
Wow.
I didn't have control of for what you see now, I'm extremely grateful for what I got back, because there's so many people that have head injuries and don't come back. They're very much trapped inside of themselves. And that was kind of what was going on with me. My brain was going about 100 miles an hour, but I couldn't make it come out of my mouth. Right. I, to this day, still have a little bit of trouble with balance, but I had a horrible problem with balance then. I was falling over all the time. I couldn't keep my equilibrium together. I lost my sense of smell and my sense of taste. I damaged my shoulder. I dislocated it out. And it was all just slamming into the door of the car, being hit in the side. Okay. So that's where I initially took the head injury, was on that side. But because the brain moved inside of the head and hit the back side of my skull, it affected my eyesight.
Oh, I see. Okay. So what about like in your personal life? Because obviously now you've changed.
Yes.
Right? So did that affect the people around you?
Yes. In a strange way, it was convenient to have my son around, because the things that I'd put into him, I was able to find and get back out of him. So it was almost like when he was young, he was an empty vessel, and I was able to put pieces of myself into him. Right. Whereas when I had the car accident, I could find those pieces again. It was extremely detrimental on my wife. She sent a man to work in the morning one day, and he came home a totally different man. So the true casualty of this accident, I think, is my wife, is because she had somebody come home that was different, and it must be extremely hard for somebody to expect somebody else to be a certain way, and they can't. That's kind of what happened to me. I lost a chunk of myself. Right. To describe it, it was like being on an open plane, and there's a whole bunch of holes in this open plane. Now, in all those open plane holes, you and everybody else puts their feelings, their memories, their emotions, and all the experiences they have into those holes. So it's much easier to walk around. Myself, I felt like I was constantly falling into empty holes that I couldn't find myself. I'd fall into a hole, and then it was like, well, what used to be here? Yeah, wow. So that's kind of what happened. So in a way, I've been able to retain some of myself, but I lost some, and I had to reinvent other things.
Yeah, it makes sense, I guess, right? I know other people that have had brain injuries, but in a minor, like my young sister once got knocked over by a car. Not enough to hospitalize her, but it still affected her memory, and she had to put notes everywhere.
Same.
Yeah.
That's one of the problems with post-concussion syndrome, is that my short-term memory, I don't place things into my long-term memory well. Mm-hmm. So you can tell me something, and 5 minutes later, I've forgotten. Wow. And yet I can remember stuff 10, 15, 20 years ago,
Yes.
And when it happens to me 5 minutes from now, I can't remember what's happened at all.
Right.
I'm completely lost.
Gosh, this has been so fascinating, you know, but we're getting a little low on time. Do you have a website?
Yes, I do. It's www.patrickwood.artworks.wix.com/artworks.
Oh, okay.
And the artworks is an X, ARTWORX.
Oh, okay, we're good to. Did you bring a business card? Because we can always.
No, I
No,
don't.
okay. Well, we'll get that a little bit later. Okay, so unfortunately we're totally out of time. So I really appreciate you coming here, and I hope you come again another time.
Thank you.
Well, we're gonna have to take another break, but stay tuned. There's so much more after. All right, later.